Welcome to Muse News, the show where we talk about all things Memorial University and beyond. Today we are joined by Dr. Mike Wahl. He is an assistant professor of clinical anatomy at the MUN's School of Medicine, and he's also the host of Health Explored on NTV, The Wahl Show on VOCM, and the author of a new book, Health Explored, A Journey in Happiness, Healing, and Humanity, published by Breakwater Books. Welcome, Mike, to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So, I want to talk a little bit about everything. I mean, you got a lot going on. You got your radio show, you got your TV show, and you got your new book. But let's talk a little bit more about your story. So growing up, you gravitated towards weightlifting, and that was kind of like your first entry into the world of sports and health. Is that right?
Yeah, it's funny. It was an interesting thing. Like no one can tell how tall I am here, but I'm not the tallest guy. And when I was a kid, I was even smaller. And all my friends played sports. I always wanted to play sports. And one of the things we did when we played sports was go and do dryland training. So we're doing weights one day, and lo and behold, the boys are trying to have a bench press contest, so they put on 60 pounds, and I muscle through it barely, and then they put 80 pounds on for the next thing, and they said, "Are you ready?" And I said, They thought I said, and they dropped right in my head. And I went home. I was devastated by it, but it actually stirred up this sort of flame inside of me. I'm a little bit competitive, so I got a home set of weights and started training all the time, and before I knew it, I was developing programs for them, and I realized I was a lot better at training people than I was being an athlete. So I played sports, but I realized that if I gave my programs that I was doing at 5'8" to a 6'4", person with good genetics, I'd probably do well. And that kind of led me on this trail of kinesiology and coaching some pro athletes in the States, and then back to MUN. Yeah,
so you actually visited the gym in New York City where with your show. What was it like revisiting that?
Yeah, it was wild. So, when I was at UNB, we had one of the best hockey teams in the country, and I was the strength coach for that team, which was really fortunate for my resume coming out of university. And I always say the work that pays the most in the long run doesn't pay at all, and that was volunteering and doing part of my practicum. But as a result, I got a job with a very famous Canadian strength coach who then passed the reins over to a gentleman by the name of Ben Prentice. Now, Ben Prentice is widely regarded as the best hockey strength coach in the world. So I went down a couple summers ago, myself and Braden King, who's the director of a TV show, and we revisited it. Now, when I was down there first, it was an old gas station that was retrofitted, and there was good athletes coming in through there, like Marty St. Louis trained there when you got MVP and ended up going to the Hall of Fame. But now it's a mega complex with a rink inside and millions of dollars of equipment, and there was 23 pros in the gym while we were there. It was just insane. But it was awful nice to go back and see it. And a nice thing was, the boss now, who has a whole army of trainers, was his second hire. And so we were able to get nostalgic and look back, and it was nice to see each other doing our things that we're passionate about later on in life. And I'm really proud of him, and it was fun.
So after your undergrad kinesiology at UNB, you went on to do a doctorate at Memorial University. Is that right?
Yeah. So what happened was I kind of hit a glass ceiling when I was in New York. I knew I wasn't going to replace Ben. He was the main student of this other guy, and eventually was going to sort of inherit the business from him. So I asked Charles Poliquin, who was his mentor, and he was Canadian, by the way, from McMaster. I said, who would you go and study under if you were me to get a master's? And he said, well, there's a guy I went to school with at McMaster, Dr. David Boehm in HKR. You should go work with him. So I messaged Dr. Boehm, and literally 15 minutes before 9 on September 11th, 2001, I got a letter from Dr. Boehm saying, sure, next September you can come on by. And I was telling a client couple minutes later, and that's when the World Trade Centers got hit, and I was in New York.
Wow.
So it was like, that's a sign, it's time to come home. So I came here to do a master's degree in neuromuscular physiology. I started a company which grew quite large, and then during that period of time I also got a PhD in clinical epidemiology, because that helped my business, and I was studying obesity in response to a helicopter crash that happened offshore here a number of years ago. So it's been a kind of, my mom always says life is like a braided river, where all these paths sort of split and divide, but they all kind of lead to one place. And that's the way I look at my life. I've had this really interesting career where I never really thought the direction it was going, and it's taken me now back to the halls of Memorial.
And that full circle moment with David Boehm in the same episode with your old employer from New York, which is amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad you saw that. That was a really special moment for me. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Dr. Boehm and for Ben, and to bring those two worlds together, the academics and the applied, was really, really fun. And that's one of the things we get to do with our show is that, when you have creative freedom to develop your own documentary series and be able to tell stories that you find interesting, a lot of the time they become really interesting for viewers too, because it's like being a chef where you've got this amazing ingredient here and this amazing ingredient here, and you put them together and you just want to present it to people and be like, do you like it? And then in that episode, I think a lot of people really resonated with that because they don't know what happens behind the scenes. Why are we learning kinesiology science and how does it translate? But they know it now when they see their favorite player on the ice.
Wow, yeah. And so you're doing your grad, you're doing your PhD, and you're also starting definitions, right? Yeah. So take us through what was it like scaling a company that started during a university degree to like 25 offices, and what was it like leaving it? I mean,
That's So when I was doing my master's, my first year into the master's, I started to train people right away, athletes, and then some business people asked me to start training them, and so I had to go find another location, and then I was approached by a business person. We started this Gym Definitions, and this was back before personal training was a thing, so I'm sure it's hard for a lot of listeners to understand this, guys, but back in 2002, we had to drive a banker around town explaining how somebody might be willing to pay a personal trainer $20 an hour to count reps and design a program, and this is a degreed kinesiologist, right? And we finally got the funding to do it, and our personal training business really grew. We were the first gym of its kind in all of Newfoundland, and one of the first in Canada, actually. And so we grew it. But what happened before long was the people that were coming to the gym were business leaders, and they started to say, well, can you come work in our company? So we said, sure, that's an office. I can handle that. And then eventually somebody said, well, I was out in an oil rig, and the food they're eating out there isn't healthy, and the guys are really high risk for heart disease, and if they have a heart attack out there, we can't get them in time, and it's really dangerous. Can you go improve their health? And I was like, sure. So I went out, and we started to work with this heavy industry population. My dad was a geologist, so I wasn't afraid of being in these types of sites. Anyway, long story short, the same injuries these hockey players had were the same ones the Roughnecks had. Bad rotator cuffs, bad backs. And when they get injured, it costs the companies a lot of money. We started to fix injuries. We started to reduce health risk, which is basic common sense, teaching the kitchen to cook healthy food, helping the medic to take blood pressure regularly, and giving people exercise programs, and lifting safety, and drink enough water when it's hot, all these basic things. Anyway, it ended up growing. We went across the country. We expanded to the UK and the US, and then we were eventually acquired by a huge medical company, which then led to 25 offices across the country. I was the head of the wellness division, and then we got bought by TELUS Health. So it was like this huge evolution. And then at that point, I kind of had some options. So I decided to take some time off.
And why is it important that employers focus on the health of their employees?
Well, they cost so much money when they're sick, number one. So from a purely financial decision, it makes good business sense. But secondly, the reality is our biggest resource in business is the people we have. And sometimes we are the ones that are pushing them towards poor health. If we're putting them out in the middle of the ocean and we don't give them healthy food and we're making them work 12 hours a day, sometimes on night shift in the harshest environments in the world, it's really the responsibility of the employers to take care of these people because they're putting a lot on the line for them. So I think that's the first reason. The second reason is because people aren't educated in it, and it's a huge risk. We're not taught about finances unless we're in business, and health unless we're in kinesiology or nursing or med school. And so these are things that general population don't have access to, and when they are empowered with this information, and this is literally what I do now with the radio and the TV and everything, is that when they have this information and it's accessible to them, then they can start to make changes in their life, and then they can improve their quality of life. And that's another thing companies should do. They should take care of their communities.
Now, health is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and a lot of your focus is on pretty simple solutions like nature, water, culture. A lot of people that come up in this space are hawking certain supplements or certain specific snake oil that some may call types of things, the products that they're selling. Yeah. What differentiates you from that space, and what do you make of some of the big names in health influencer space? Well,
I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I kind of looked at going back to the basics, there's two reasons. Number one, when I had my company, when we got to the big stage and we're working with the telecom, right? Some of the things we were selling were things like smartphone apps for mental health. And I thought, if we're going to meditate, probably getting on our phone isn't the best thing for our mental health. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I kind of got stuck in, do I really believe in this, right? Like, is this really the right thing? Because I had traveled all over the world already, and I'd seen cultures that were doing it with next to nothing, let alone, fancy tech in their hand. And so that was the first thing. And then the second thing is in academics, and I work with some incredible scientists in BMS. Biomedical sciences is where a lot of the real molecular work is done. Quite often we look deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. And I always tell this story about about seeing the thing that's directly in front of you or inferring down. And we tend to look so deep, but then when I look at how much information I've learned in exercise physiology or about biochemistry and stuff, I realize it's not really making a difference in our health. Our health is getting worse as a community day after day. And when we look back to when it was better, it was when things were simpler, right? So maybe we need to take those things that are familiar to us, reintroduce them back into our lives because they're relatively inherent for people as human beings, and then combine the modern with it. Like, I met this geneticist in Sardinia, and he was a genius. His name was Dr. Ivo Parisi. He said the cultures that are doing the best when it comes to health in the world right now take their cultural practices that were inherent to who they are. A lot of them tend to be quite isolated communities where they can maintain these, and they combine it with modern science. It's that marriage between the two. But in our culture, we're going so far down the rabbit hole of modern. It's modern medicine, fantastic. Keep us alive. We don't get infection. A mother doesn't die giving birth, okay? Or at least a lot less than it used to. But we're also eating modern foods, and we're on modern devices, and we're not exercising and moving like we used to. We need to find a way to incorporate that traditional way of being a human, and then with this modern medicine, and that's where longevity and quality of life reside.
And you've made this comment about Newfoundland and Labrador and how we need to embrace our cultural traditions in this way as well. Mm-hmm. What would that look like?
Yeah, there's so many things in Newfoundland. Like the first season of our show, and it had such a good response, that's why we decided to go around the world. I wanted to celebrate all the things that were specific to who we are as a people. And I say who we are because I'm a Newfoundlander by choice now, right? So I'm still from New Brunswick originally, but I've been here for most of my adult life, and I call it home, and I really love the culture that we have here. There's things here that we have, like foraging. Sean Dawson's a good friend of mine. I was out with him on Random Island the other day, and everywhere we walked there was foods that were available. So first of all, there's a food tradition there. There is music. Dr. Ben Zendel in the Faculty of Medicine will tell you that music is one of the ways to offset the risk of dementia, especially for musicians who've been playing their whole life. We have storytelling and community, and there's all these hallmarks of aging that are coming out now. And yes, our physical health and our mental health are huge variables. We need to take care of. Our genetics are important. But social community is critically important. Loneliness is the number one killer for older people. Like, it doesn't matter if your health is good. If you're wildly lonely, it becomes really bad for our health. So we have those things. Then we've got other things that I think are important about being around water. Water, I interviewed Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, who wrote the book The Blue Mind, which transformed my belief of how powerful water was. I always knew water did something for me, but I met him and he wrote the book on it. And then I saw New Zealand Maori youth that had been incarcerated and involved in gang violence use surf therapy to help rehabilitate them. And we have that at our fingertips. So literally, there's so many things we have that we should be doing, and then after we tick off those things we love that resonate with who we are as a people, then we can start getting into some of those other more prescriptive things.
So a lot of medical care ends up being after the fact. We're not care. Really doing preventative care. What does changing the approach at a governmental level look like for you?
I think that everything comes from education. I don't think anybody wants to be sick. But I also think a lot of people don't feel empowered. I think there's a lot of challenges when it comes to, again, those people that are marketing things and selling things. Those things they're selling are expensive, and they're limiting, and they don't allow access for people that don't have the means. A lot of people are struggling right now. The costs are really high. So I think that if you look at some of the cultures that are doing it best, education on health is really important. So one of my honor students this year is going to be looking at the contrast between Scandinavian education for youth in school on health, and then contrasting it with us here. And I think that with a bit of education, that'll be the starting point. And on that same note, we have a generation that has been educated that's dealing with a lot of health risks right now. But when I was in Morocco, I met a gentleman by the name of Saad Abid, who's an environmentalist, and he said the best way to change adult behavior is to get children to teach them. Because when a child says, hey, mister, you shouldn't throw that thing away, you feel really bad because you're supposed to be leading by example. Well, kids could do the same thing for health if they were educated, and we may be able to transform our society a bit. It doesn't mean that we're going to fix everything, but when we look at our healthcare costs, an awful lot of our healthcare costs are related to lifestyle-related diseases, metabolic diseases, things that can either be preventable or less severe with lifestyle added in. But again, I don't blame anybody in the province if they haven't been taught, but give somebody some education, I bet you'd notice a big difference.
So you've traveled to over 55 countries.
Yeah, 60 now.
60 now. I had some old figures.
Yeah.
What has travel done for your life, and how has it opened your eyes to a different world of health and knowledge?
Yeah, I've had an interesting thing. I was exposed to travel as a kid. I was fortunate. Obviously, I came from a family that was able to travel, and I realized how lucky that is. It builds a sense of courage in you when you've been away and seen things. But my father passed away when he was quite young, at 64 years old, which was really, really hard. He died from pancreatic cancer, which is a devastating disease. And if anybody here is listening that's experienced that before, they know it's a death sentence, right? Like, it's the lowest survival rate of any cancer, and the way he had it was inoperable. When he got near the end, we were always really, really close, but we had some really deep conversations, the type of conversations you really want to have as a father and a son. And he had a bunch of things he always wanted to do in his life, and some of those things were places. And so when I sold my company, I had a couple of years, I started to knock off some of these things on the list and start to travel. And then when I started the TV show, I was able to do some more of these things, almost unintentionally. They were things that I always wanted to try, and he always wanted to do. We agreed I should try in my life. And so for me, it's opened up a whole new world of appreciation for how unique the planet is. But it's also created this sense of like unity as humans for me. I have met people from every culture, every belief system, every language, and with lots of money, with very, very little by our standards. But people are people, and it's made me really appreciative of the fact that, like, we're all a lot more similar than we think, and that we're all just humans trying to make our way in the world, and it's been really fun to see that. So from the health side, it's been nice to see how people live the good life, however they defined it.
And so what is next for you? I mean, you're heading away for a few weeks. Don't want to spoil any future seasons of
That's okay.
Health Explored, but you just came out with the book. What's next for your endeavors?
Yeah, so obviously the book is new. It's available everywhere books are sold, and Indigo and Kohl's and all sorts of local bookstores as well, and Breakwater Books. That's been fantastic. That's been something I'm really going to focus on giving a bit of promotion to. When the book came out, we kind of hit the ground running, and then myself and our director, Braden King, traveled for a solid month in the month of April. There's a bit of a gap in the medical school academic year then, so that's when I do my traveling. And then in 2 weeks, actually next week, I'm going to be traveling to Switzerland to film the last 2 episodes of this season, which would be fantastic. I'd still do the radio show all the time. I'm still teaching a ton at the medical school, which I really, really love, and I teach a lot of the undergraduate physiology for the biochem students and human biosciences. Really great stuff. And you never know, maybe do another season. Our show has been picked up now by 9 networks, and we're in 110 countries and over 200 million homes. So,
wow.
Yeah, we're all across Canada now and really growing, and that just happens over time. So our 3rd season coming out, we expect it to grow even more, and then it's getting tempting. We're getting some ideas for season 4. Me and Braden can't spend time together, because if we do, we just come up with, like, let's go here, let's do this, and then it ends up happening.
So what's your biggest advice to a student that wants to find a career in the realm of health?
I would find a career in health, but also in a career in anything they're passionate about. I came from a family of geologists. My mom was a business person, but she was also a gym teacher, and she taught me a lot of stuff when I was growing up about health. But my parents encouraged me to do what really lit a fire in me, and I think that I've had very busy times in my life, being an entrepreneur and doing a PhD part-time in the evenings on weekends, and now with academics in this, but I've never felt like I'm working. I mean, some days feel like they're work, but in general, my career has been fueled by a real enthusiasm, because I know what I like to do, and I sort of pay attention to the signals when I'm getting a little bit deviated from that. So I would say, for people to find their passion, but also if they find something that they think they're supposed to be doing and it's not the right path, to also have the courage to turn around. The guy who founded Patagonia said he was a mountain climber, and quite often he would go up on a route and he would end up at a cliff and stare over the cliff and realize he couldn't go any further. And he said, but when I went to go back, and I turned around. I was still facing forward. I wasn't going backwards. I was just going forward in a different direction. It's that compass that we have, that spidey sense, that intuition that we have, that's what's really magical, and we have to listen to that. And sometimes when we're younger, it can be really challenging for us to blend out all the other pressures and the signals we're getting, either from society, our parents, our friends, what we think we should be doing, and really just follow what we're passionate about. But if you find what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life.
And what is the biggest advice you'd give to people on managing their health?
I would. There's 4 stages of learning. This is a good one. 4 stages of learning, and that is that the first stage a lot of people live in, and it's that we're in unconscious incompetence. So we don't even know we're doing it wrong. And ignorance is bliss, you know? I don't want to learn anything. I'm good doing the way I'm doing it. I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy. The best thing to do is to move to the second stage. And the second stage is called conscious incompetence. So you learn, and you learn from sources that are accessible. This is why we do our radio show. This is why I love doing shows with guys like you. And we do our television program, or even write storybooks with pictures that are beautiful. And that's because once people learn something, they can't unlearn it. Right? And then when they learn it, they unintentionally do it sometimes because they know it's good for them, because they feel good. And as a result, that leads to what's called conscious competence. So now they're doing it. It takes effort. They might not do it consistently, but they're starting to see it. And when they do it, they start to get benefits. Eventually, people get to a point where it's second nature. That's unconscious competence. Very few people ever reach that. We always float in this level of like conscious incompetence and conscious competence. But you know what? That's where they need to get a little bit of knowledge from the right source, somebody that appeals to you, somebody that resonates with you, somebody you can trust that's not trying to sell you something, that will give you that starting point, and then do it in your own terms. Because the reality is, when I did my PhD, I looked at every possible variable to improve things, whether it be a hockey training program like we would give a pro hockey player, or somebody just going out and doing regular activity. What we found was there was no difference for most people. Whether it was the most scientific program in the world for the average Joe or Jill, whoever, it's literally just doing healthy activities regularly and things that you love. There's no magic bullet, and it's consistency and doing what you enjoy. The people that did these crazy programs in my study, that were doing the best possible exercise prescription, as soon as they didn't have a trainer, they quit and they never did it again because they hated it. And the people that I put in my study that were allowed to do whatever they wanted as long as they did it consistently stuck with it. And they had long-term health gains, even though these people were supposedly doing the perfect prescription.
Do you ever see, in your experience, people go too far to the other end where passion turns to obsession?
Yeah, I think that life is like, and this is where I sort of come from. I was a competitive bodybuilder. I was a competitive power lifter. I did all that stuff, right? I eat, slept, and breathed it all the time. But I think that health is kind of like a bar stool, okay? So if you're at the Breezeway and you sit on a bar stool and there's 4 legs in that stool, and one of the legs is really loose, or 3 of the legs are really loose, and there's one strong leg, that thing's going down as soon as you put pressure on it. I would compare the people that just prioritize their physical health, and they want to look a certain way, and they want to be in great shape. And I was down to 5% body fat. I get it. I understand what that's like, but that's not sustainable, because as a result, you have to sacrifice so much other stuff, right? So I think the 4 pillars of this. I think the physical health is an important part. We have to be healthy. It doesn't mean we have to have a six-pack. It just means we have to be healthy. Our mental health has to be good, and there's lots of supports out there. And we both wear glasses, and if you can't see, you need glasses. That's it. And sometimes we need glasses with our mental health. We need a bit of help. We need a bit of expert advice. So we need physical health to be taken care of. We need to balance our mental health. We need to have a sense of purpose in our life, which gets us out of bed. The Japanese know all about this in the island of Okinawa, where they live to be some of the oldest people in the world. And then lastly, you need to have community. And if you can have those 4 things, and you're getting think about your transcript. If you got a 80% in all those, right, you'd get an A. But if you got a 99% in one and then 45% in all the rest, you'd be borderline passing, right? And you'd fail those 3 courses. So it's better to be good at everything and not perfect at one thing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mike. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Cheers. That is Mike Wahl. He is the author of Health Explored, A Journey in Happiness, Healing, and Humanity. You can listen to the Muse News wherever you find your podcasts, and you can buy Mike Wahl's book wherever you buy your books. Thank you so much for listening.